Everyone, welcome to the Mom Series, The Misunderstanding of Multiplicity. My name is Maria. So I thought I would do a video tonight on anniversary dates. And this is something that has always intrigued me as to why trauma anniversary dates have such a strong pull on us, even years after the event, and how we can be approaching anniversary trauma dates and not even be really thinking about it, but still reacting to it. And how some anniversary dates totally wallop us, and others we can just zoom by. So, this came about because this month is a huge anniversary date for me. And I really wanted to approach it differently after 30 years. So, as I've said in other videos, 30 years ago, and my kids are grown, they're grown adults, when I realized I needed a lot of therapy, and I wanted to add, there's a lot of physical sickness that went on that brought me to a point of realizing I needed help with raising my children and with other people realizing I needed help too. I had had meningitis 4 times in a year and a half, and I had had surgery, and I just was not recovering from it. I was internally bleeding and had to go lie in bed and be sedated and have visiting nurses and home health makers take care of my children, and the nurses take care of me. And even though we had round the clock nurses and good people in our house and everything, it wasn't good for my children to see their moms sick for that long physically. And then being in a situation where I was having to lie down in bed, not really be in control of my body, and be told you must stay there and be in pain, brought me back to all the times in my life when I was younger that I felt out of control, and pain and fear and worry was right there. And that kind of just really catapulted into a complete blow up of my world and meltdown. And so, what do we do with those trauma anniversaries? Well, I thought I was doing something good, and I was, by accepting help from family members. And I knew that I was doing the best thing for my children. And I knew that it was a blessing to have family that could help me. And even though I knew all of those good things, I went into deep grief. And the actual therapy I was going for trauma in my past got totally sideswiped by the grief and the new change of waking up in the morning and not having my children and not packing their book bags the night before and not putting out the breakfast in the morning and not singing to them at night and praying with them at night and doing all the things we did, homework around the table and making dinner, and just all of that was gone. And I convinced myself, well, I'm doing the right thing. I'm doing the right thing. I'm going to therapy. I'm getting my medical stuff taken care of, and my children are well taken care of. So it's okay. I can call my family and talk to my children and tell them I love them and talk about their day, and everything was fine. But it wasn't. It wasn't. It was a re-traumatization, and probably the worst. And I felt guilty for feeling bad about it because I knew I was doing something good for my children. I knew that my family was making great sacrifices, and I loved them with my whole heart. And I knew that my children were not uh, going away because they hated me or they, despised me or something. I beat up on myself terribly during that time. And that is when all the self-harm stuff started to really increase in my life. And I had a lot of regret and a lot of just self-talk that was, oh my God, you suck as a mother. What's the matter with you? And the more I fought with my body and said, get better, the more I couldn't. The more it just, I was in a battle with my body, not so much my mind, my body. And then it became a battle of my mind. So, of course, I read books like The Battlefield is in the Mind by Joyce Myers. I worked the workbook. I went to church when I could and did all those lovely things. And worked with my therapist for, well, what can you do now to move forward? Well, it wasn't until 30 years later that I realized I couldn't move forward. I still saw my children years later, even now, as that 8 and 10-year-old that I messed up with, that they had to go get help somewhere else. So totally, if I had a bad time during the anniversary time, I felt bad mentioning that. And years later, I started to really study about and learn from my doctor, and then go back into stuff I knew about trauma, as to why this happens to people, why, um, why it can just bring up so many body memories and senses being heightened and just all that. So, what I learned is that some of the things we can do during an anniversary time, whether it be that you've lost a spouse and it was a long, hard ordeal, and you've been telling yourself, well, they're not suffering anymore. There's still regrets. There's still things you wish you could have done different. There's still the very real understanding of, well, I wish they were here. So grief is a monster, and delayed grief is worse. So I started to put into motion plans for an anniversary date once I understood what happened in trauma when I was younger, and um, and how that happened when I suddenly woke up and realized my children are gone and they're not coming back until I integrate. And nobody knew what integration looked like with MPD, DID. You got there, nobody really knew. While you're on the road to there, it could look really different. We've talked about this before, how when you begin to co-run, coexist with the other parts of yourself that you denied, and start honoring them and giving them place in your life, how that could look even more cuckoo to people. So in therapy, we're being taught to get to know the altered self parts of ourselves that we disconnected from, and connect to those memories, feelings, thoughts, and empathize with them and honor them for having helped us to live. So some of the things we can do is understand what happens in trauma. So what happens is you go through a trauma, and all the feelings and thoughts that are going on during that trauma, including every sense of your body, your hearing, your sight, your smell, a song that was playing, a food that was cooking, maybe it was sitting down at a dinner table and all of a sudden fights erupted at a dinner table when you were younger. Maybe a look on a parent's face when you knew they were going to get angry and there was going to be violence. Whatever it was, I started to avoid those kind of things and avoid triggers. So I totally cut myself off from people. Like I was like, well, I isolated. And that's really not the answer. You can't move forward when you're isolating. So you have to start putting yourself into those situations and desensitizing yourself to them. So, yet still, even though it's way back there, I didn't want to be like Lot's wife and look back and turn into a pillar of salt. I mean, that's the whole purpose of not looking back. But what do we learn from back there is important. So, one of the things that I learned to do was mark the calendar. Just because whether we do or don't mark the calendar, our body and our brain already has. So we could be looking at the calendar, we could be going through our day, and not even be thinking about something that happened way back then. But our body, our brain remembers and tells our body, and we're reacting. So in trauma, you're doing everything you can to survive and get by. You're kind of stuck inside of yourself, but leaving the situation around you, trying to figure out how to manage it, right? So, marking it on the calendar ahead of time and knowing, okay, this is a date that's difficult, and having a plan really helped. So, when we're going through trauma, our feelings, thoughts, and senses leave us, and we are concentrating on surviving. So we disconnect from the feelings, the thoughts, and the senses, and all around us. And our brain, every day, we're experiencing life and we're having feelings and thoughts, normal everyday life. We're experiencing situations and we're having emotion and feeling and thoughts about our day. But during trauma, we're not. We're just fleeing. So our brain takes all those events, all those details in the trauma, and really stores it. It bypasses feelings and thoughts and files it away as trauma. And it goes past. There's a very interesting part of our brain, the vagus area of our brain, that it it bypasses, and it actually remembers this is trauma and makes a file in our brain, trauma, with all the details right there. But the problem becomes when our brain also takes all those stored feelings of maybe nausea, of disgust, of shame, of regret, of betrayal, and brings that with it, along with if a police siren is going by, or the weather of that day, what we were wearing. All of it gets too much, gets stored with that trauma, details that we really don't need. But now we're reacting to a weather pattern that's going on that is remindful of that, a holiday, an event like sitting around a dinner table, a person's voice, an inflection in their voice, a raised voice, and we start to react to all of that. So that is the really real problem of our brain helping us to get past the trauma. So some of the things we can do is mark the day. And we can choose to ignore the day, and it might work, or we can plan for the day. So Martin Luther King weekend in January, and then I'd say all of this week and into February was really tough for me. And every year it really was. I just re-round in my head what I could have done differently, if only. and if only doesn't really help. So mark the day, and we can really go over top and make kind of a ritual or a ceremony of that day of different events. We can change by rewrite, we could try to rewrite that day and do something different. Like it can be anything. It can be retail shopping, it can be a vacation, it can be uh, a mindful thing to do, whether that's, for me, it's knitting, crocheting, and because I knit and crochet so often, that's not enough to help me focus. So I have to really throw myself into something that really takes all my concentration, and that would be something like maybe Fair Isle knitting or embroidery, where I have to maybe follow a chart, a really hard pattern that takes my brain, my hands, everything, keep me busy. So that's one thing I can do. Another thing is, if you have felt really awful during that anniversary time and you're maybe having a lot of flashbacks and fear and disgust, is if you're a self-harmer, is for me, I was a cutter. And so I used grounding techniques like cold water, like immersing my hands in cold water when I wanted to cut. Sometimes sticking my whole head in a cold bowl of water to kind of wake myself and get a hold of myself. Don't do that. Another thing was doing fun things for myself, like cutting my hair, coloring my hair. Cutting our hair is such an emotional um, thing to do. It can really, um, uh, instead of cutting ourselves, cutting our hair can be a good thing, and doing it ourselves can be even more empowering feeling. Saying no to things that we normally would do, and that means if it just hurt too much to be around all the people involved in that event. So in the anniversary event of January, I avoided my children. I avoided my family. And they would have a get together in January for birthdays. And I always found that time very hard, but it was also a fun time. So that was something that we started to do. Another thing, I've written a few things down, so I'm just going to look, is just being patient with myself and reminding myself I will get to another time and it will be better. The file in our brain that files away trauma will always remember it, even when we try not to. Some of the things, let me see what I wrote down. I did. Sounds and sights and smells. If the trauma involved, all of your senses are really heightened during a trauma because you're going by, everything is awakened to survive. So might be very hyper vigilant, all of a sudden be feeling things you never felt. So I would have to tell myself that I'm not having a heart attack. I am having grief pain in my chest. That's what I'm having. Or if it was a trauma from the past, way back, that came up, I would say, This is not happening now. I would remind myself this happened then. Not for me, being able to walk around and not having to go to bed and not having to lay down and be stuck there. Staying away from my bedroom. I would stay out on the couch instead of being in that bed. Just even changing the breakfast routine that I used to do with my kids. I used to set out little oatmeal packets the night before. I was very organized because I had a lot going on. I would set out the breakfast bowls the night before. I would put their little oatmeal packets in there. I would pack their book bags. I would always write a little note to go in their lunchbox that they could get later with their snack. And I had to just stay away from all those things. Not look at what I used to do and just move forward and just not do those things. The grounding things were mindful, really just mindful things like knitting, crocheting, coloring. Adult coloring books now are really big. Artwork, sketching, journaling, a must always. But then making note of the progress, looking back at the journals and seeing where I was then. And this week I spent most of my time going back over all my journals, my notes from therapy, homework that I had to do, and looking at the progress, whether that be the weight I was then, the medication I was on then that I'm not on now, the whatever it was, the foods I ate then, just not doing any of those things. If it gets really bad during anniversary time, really seeking support and having some people kind of lined up that are going to be objective, but also a sounding board, not really going to give you an opinion, but will hear you out and just understand where you are and just be with you. That was really important. So I enlisted some friends that knew that was a really hard time. And it wasn't about the trauma so much as doing something different on that day. So rewriting it. And then honoring the passage of time. And not berating myself. So I'm talking about one specific trauma, which is now, which this year, what I did was I deliberately didn't talk to the people that were the closest to my heart. I tried to not speak to them. I kept it short, and that would be my children. As much as I love them, I was just like, well, I'm just going to be short with them because I didn't want to bring it up, and I knew it was there. It was there like the big old ugly, weird, polka dotted, strange looking elephant in the room. For me, the anniversary was Dr. Martin Luther King Day, which has always been my most favorite holiday, and it's a long weekend. And so it was a little harder because that's something that you just, it's there, you know. So I started getting involved in caring days, like doing a service for other people, helping other people. And Martin Luther King weekend, we're really encouraged to do that. So that really helped. And really just understanding that my brain will always remember it, even though I'm trying to forget it and move on, and just being gentle with myself. Found a really cool anniversary plan. Show it to you. trauma anniversary plan. And one of the things that was the most important for me to do was I'm a list maker, a to-do list. I've got a to-do list on my refrigerator. I've got a to-do list over here. Every day I make these to-do lists and I get through them. But sometimes during anniversary dates, our energy is low. We don't feel good. We do need to give ourselves that time. And I found what was easier is to the day before start the day before making a list for the next day. And then because it's hard to focus during an anniversary date sometimes, the list was already made, and that day, that week, I could check off things and reprioritize things, take some things off my list that I really didn't have to do. So that was important. Another grounding activity that works for me is math. I was never really good at math in grammar school, but in college, I just flew with it. I just in grammar school, there was so much turbulence going on in my home. I could not focus on equations and learning that math. And yet in college, I absolutely loved math. I loved the challenge of an equation, the challenge of algebra, the challenge of geometry, the challenge of physics. So really brainy things, and that kept me busy. Some people do puzzles. Some people do tapping, and that's something I'm going to talk about later. Some tools, tapping, which really helps, and I want to go over some tools later. EDMR, things that really just work, meditations, prayer. For me, it's always been prayer and praise. So gratitude. So looking back and saying, I am grateful that my children had a home that was safe and loving. And I am grateful that I had family that was willing to sacrifice and step up and not then add on to it. Oh, gee, look what they did for me. Look what they did for my kids. Oh, wow, I owe them. Without the obligation of, I owe you for the rest of my life. Owe you. And I have to be well. And I took that off. Looking at ways I changed in those years, and like I said earlier, just stepping out more and not being so isolated, trusting my voice. One of the hardest things that I went through during every trauma in my life was not paying attention to my gut intuition. And that is one of our senses. It's the sixth sense. So say you were a child that was abused and or tricked into something that was wrong. For me, my therapist and I looked at things that really didn't make me feel safe, that should have made me feel safe, like saying things like, "You're safe with me," or "You can trust me," or "You can tell me, I won't tell anyone." Actually, those were things that were the opposite. When I heard "You're safe," or "Everything's okay," that was my alarm that things weren't okay when I knew they weren't okay. So I learned to start trusting my gut and knowing, okay, I'm not safe with you. I can't trust you. You will lie to me. And really believing what I knew was true. It wasn't a paranoia. It was knowing, no, you've lied to me before. You've hurt me. You said I was safe. You said I could trust you. You said you would never do that again, and you're doing it. And knowing they're going to do it, and just giving them grace to change on their own journey, but realizing I am going to trust my gut. So I say that takes a lot of the self-blame away, because we maybe didn't trust our gut. Maybe we knew that parent wasn't going to be okay. Or when everybody sat down at the table for dinner, it was going to erupt into a big fight. An ambulance was going to show up. The police were going to show up. Or even going to bed at night. Knowing that certain sounds in the house were an alarm to me that it's not going to be okay. Instead of telling myself, well, you're just being silly, now I really listen to those things, because the trauma leaves us hyper vigilant. But we need to reassign that and say, if it's not the same person, it's not the same person anymore. They can't hurt me. So that was then. This is now. A lot of that I had to do. What else? What else? What else? What else did I do? Yeah. People you could hang out with that wouldn't judge you or try to make you feel better. Sometimes in an anniversary day, you do have to just be in the molly grows, and it's okay. And see, it's okay. All those feelings that we didn't feel then, it's okay to feel them now, and not be drowned out by them and just run over by them. So, getting through a anniversary date can feel like we're in constant brain fog, low energy, or hypervigilant energy, anxious, or really tired, or just a eerie feeling like something's going to happen. And just instead of wiping that away and saying, well, I don't know what that is, we do know what it is. And saying, I do know what it is. And acknowledging that and owning it. So this anniversary, I was watching the Super Bowl, and I was remembering the first year that my kids were with my cousins and the Buffalo Bills were in the Super Bowl, I think, for the first time, and then a couple years later, a second time. And I was remembering that and thinking, this is like coming full circle. So I didn't root for the Bills. I know. I live in New York, and I didn't root for the Bills. I rooted for Kansas, and it felt good. It felt good to watch the game. So that's just some of the things I did different. So that was like creating a new association. Is I'm not going to root for the Bills. Here they are again, and I'm not going to root for them because we were all together rooting for them during that anniversary time. And I mean, it's just things that you do a little different, but still recognize that anniversary is going to be there. We may feel sad, we may feel angry, we may feel pissed off and betrayed, and of our own self, like we betrayed ourselves. Or one of the things that went through my head all the time was, I should have been stronger. I should have maxed it up. I should have, I should have, I should have gotten out of bed. I shouldn't have listened to my doctor. I should have said, no, I'm okay, and just carried on. I should have not gone to therapy as much. I should have not dug so deep then that it uh, made my home so hard for my children. So um, that's some of the things I've thought of. Everybody can make their own plan um, because the body does remember. The body does remember. So as much as I approach this January as, oh, Martin Luther King Day, and I actually, my daughter had sent me a little Christmas tree over the holidays, little 18-inch Christmas tree, and Mom, I think this is something that would be cool. I could do a theme tree and just decorate it all year and keep it up. And they're very popular. If you go look on Pinterest, see people do trees for Easter, trees for spring, trees for Valentine's Day. So that really has been helpful. And I made a bunch of peace signs in black and brown and red and yellow and uh, hung those with Martin Luther King, Thomas Jefferson, Susan B. Anthony, and love, love, love. And now I'm working on hearts or and little groundhogs and things to decorate with. So just having those things to do. Um, and then there are anniversaries that people don't, uh, they kind of poo poo, especially miscarriages. I had two miscarriages and I never thought about it. I never thought I should think about it. I thought, well, it was probably for the best. God had a bit of a different plan. It wasn't meant to be, all the things you're told. Um, and many times people don't talk about miscarriages because the very words sound strange. Like like you missed something, like, oh, you missed your target, or oh, well, you went the wrong way or something. When no, you were doing everything right and you were supposed to have a baby in your arms and you don't. And that is an anniversary thing that I think we don't give enough time to. We don't talk about enough. And even terminating pregnancies, many women have had abortions and felt it was the best thing to do, or counseled even to do that, and felt it was between God and them. And still we berate ourselves. So all of those anniversaries, it could be anything really that traumatized us. And not looking at the word trauma as such a big, huge, awful event, because there are so many traumas just with getting through life, and they are lessons to be learned. They are experience that we learn from how to cope better the next time we're in that situation, if we should find ourselves in that situation. Does it ever get better? Yes, it does. I can say that. The 30 years of every January, every Martin Luther King Day, going through everything over and over again, pulling out my kids' little sleepers and blankets and looking at their handwriting and all that, and going through the picture albums and everything. I I do it, but I have to remind myself they're okay. This year it was harder because I didn't feel that my kids were okay. Because last year at this time, it was a whole nother re-traumatization. Like everything we had strived to do with all that therapy, family therapy, my cousins, what they did to enrich my children's life, all that felt like it was all for nothing. Like it all just blew up. So our family had a splinter, huge, and just there's no complete silence. There's no getting back. And I had to remind myself I can pick up the phone and call my kids and check on them and see if they're okay. I still can do that. I can reach out. And that's just something, that's just where we're at. And the very family that was there and helpful and everything are no longer a part of our lives. And they've chosen that. And that happened last year. And I cannot do anything about that. I cannot change that. So that is a re-traumatization of a mother blunder, what I call the worst thing that ever happened in my life, but it was filled with blessings, but it was the worst crushing thing to me. And I know to my children, I know it was hard for them to adjust to a new home and to people they barely knew and everything new, and to not have all those traditions and comforts that we did and things we did together. So during this anniversary time, I reminded myself, I got out all their little toys and things that I saved, memory things, and I reminded myself, we did do these things. They did have a good life. They did have fun. I had fun. And then they had more fun at their uh, with their family that cared for them. And now we're all just in a different place, and we're moving on. So whatever the anniversary is, and I even thought about 911, September 11th, how people must every year. It's marked. There's a memorial, and it's there. And how people must go through the sirens, the smoke, the smell, the sight, um, all that can come back so easily. And that's the really real problem of trauma anniversaries. And there really isn't a way to make it go away. It just is. It just is another day on the calendar. That it's a time period that just subconsciously affects our body, subconsciously affects our mind. Within a fraction of a second during traumas, our feelings and thoughts flee and get filed away as alert, alarm, trauma. And somewhere in the pathways that goes past the neural, there actually is a lot of science behind this, that it's almost like a cell file that just remembers all those senses, and it returns. It returns on its own because we're able to handle it. We're able to uh, um, deal with it, which is why I think going back and looking for repressed memories now at 61, I think wasn't useful. And there's much to be said with putting the puzzle together, but I'll talk about that in another video about how memory runs scattered, and how we can connect dots that aren't really there. And then the other thing that happens in a trauma is we can feel like that trauma happened for a long time, or that it always happened, because time goes fast and then slows down. And The only example I can give you with is, as I always have said, I'll give you a quick example. For years, I have said over and over again, I can't put the Christmas tree up until December 10th because that was my brother's birthday. And I had this thought in my mind that we always put the Christmas tree up on my brother's birthday. So other people would be putting their trees up around Thanksgiving, and I'd be waiting till December 10th. And changing traditions. And going back now I'm able to remember, no, we didn't always put the tree up on December 10th. No, we didn't do that. But there was one time, the year my parents got divorced and my father actually remarried, my mother just completely was beside herself. And she just refused to get out of bed. And she couldn't get out of bed. And the holiday was getting closer, and it was getting towards my brother's birthday. And um, my grandmother actually was like, we're going to make a cake and we're going to have family over. And so we have to have the tree up. And she said, you're going to go get the tree. It's your brother's birthday. And that's what I remembered. I remembered my mom's mom saying, go downstairs in the basement, get the tree. It's your brother's birthday. We're going to put the tree up, and I'm going to make a cake, and we're going to have some of our mom's side of the family over. And I filed that away as always. But it was the one worst year that there just wasn't going to be a holiday because mom was so sad. And so we can think something always was when it was just one time, but it was so traumatizing. It was a time that was so huge to us. Because I can remember just going into that room and saying, Mom, come on, come on. You're young, you're beautiful. Come on. It's not good when he's here. You guys don't get along. He's married already. Gotta get up. And she just continued to rant and rave and then fall apart again. And that was her trauma she was going through. And my grandmother, her mom, came along and said, we're going to make this good. We're going to put the tree up. We're going to make a cake. We're going to celebrate. And somehow in my head, it went to, we always put the tree up on December 10th. There are so many situations like that in my life that I can look at now. Later on, I'm going to talk about altars and how they come to be, and how sometimes an altar is not from a trauma. It's just, or they have no actual purpose, but during a time period, they became during a really rough time, and so they're just there, and they serve no actual meaning in the now. And I have one alter part that for years in therapy, I'd be like, I don't know who the heck is, why, what. And my therapist wasn't getting anywhere with this person, and the other alters he enlisted to talk to you about them, they didn't know much about her either. And it wasn't until this year that I got, I was really scared, but I had a nice conversation with my dad, and he's older, and I was afraid to bring it up. But I was like, who the heck is this person? I have a memory of this, and what the heck was going on then? And at first he didn't, he was like, there was never anybody named that. And then he was like, whoa, we had a neighbor, and her name was this, and she had a daughter named this, and your mother thought that she was my daughter. your mother was convinced she was my daughter. And what he didn't know was that when he went to work, my mom would talk to me about it, like go on and on about her and be like, well, go be with so and so and your father's daughter, that's your father's daughter. And she would call me that name. And I really had no memory of who the heck she was. And my dad was like, oh my goodness. I was a little girl that lived with, it was our neighbor's daughter, and your mother was convinced she was my daughter. And what he didn't know was that that's all she went on about when we were alone. So, I want to really get into the nitty-gritty of how sometimes alters didn't actually go through a trauma. They don't have a part of your trauma. We just created them because it was during a stressful time. So, that's all I really want to say. If you are going through an anniversary time, just be gentle with yourself. Use your grounding techniques. Enlist people that you know are not going to poo-poo you or judge you. If you have faith in a higher power, for me it's God, go to God, pray, ask God, what would you have me to do? And, spend time praising God too, being grateful. So that's my little video on, got a little long, but I've been wanting to talk about anniversary dates because there are so many for so many of us that were in continual turmoil and in home situations that were not good and went through either domestic violence, knowing too much, having to be little parents, and just all kinds of things, whether it's sexual abuse, physical abuse, emotional abuse. There are anniversary dates that will just pop up and clobber us. And a lot of times we think we're just sick with something. We're like, I'm sick, body hurts, this hurts, that hurts, I'm crying more, I'm angry more, I'm irritable, I don't know what I'm reacting to. And it really is that. And we can go back and trace, yeah, that's an anniversary date. It comes up every year. So probably about 2 years into therapy after my children went to go live with family, my therapist realized, okay, I'm not going to get any work done around Martin Luther King Day. She is just stuck. And letting me work through that and really giving me some good tools to try to turn that date around, but also just go through it and let it be. Okay, so take care, everyone, and thanks for listening. And I hope that you'll approach your anniversary dates without feeling bad about it. Not what happened, without feeling bad about feeling bad. It's okay because we got rid of all those feelings, and it's okay to feel. And all I can think of is, I'm okay, you're okay. It's okay to feel the ugly feelings, the angry feelings. And usually the anger is covering up the sadness. And so allow ourselves to feel and acknowledge that anniversary date and take a step back from people that were very involved in that anniversary date without hating on them or, ooh, boundaries, you're a bad person, get away from me. No, no, no. Just they were a part of that, and it hurts. And so you acknowledge it and you move on. That's what I do. And hope for a better anniversary date the next time and plan for it. Take care, everyone. Have a really beautiful evening, and thanks for listening if you hung in this long. Bye.